Queen Anne has died. There are no Protestant Stuarts left. The Protestant line to the English throne now passes through James's granddaughter, Sophia, who had married a German prince with the title of Elector of Hanover, and then from her to her son George Louis, who's inherited that antiquated title. Into one quarter of the royal coat of arms pops the amazingly complicated device of a 54-year-old German princeling. And when he comes to England for his coronation, he knows perfectly well that he's not going to be anything like those other rulers. He will be almost powerless. So it really doesn't matter that he can't speak a word of English. At the opening of Parliament, King George stood in silence while his words were read by the Lord Chamberlain. The crown that had belonged to Normans, French Plantagenets, Welsh Tudors and Scottish Stuarts had now passed to the German Hanoverians. The new king's son, George Augustus, arrived from Herrenhausen to take his seat in the House of Lords as Duke of Rothesay, heir to the throne. Before leaving Germany, he proudly declared,
"I have not a drop of blood in my veins which is not English."
Rothesay, of course, is a Scottish dukedom. George Augustus did share one trait with his father's English subjects, a hearty dislike of King George, and for the same reason. 20 years before George became King of England, something very mysterious had happened to his wife's best friend, the dashing Count Königsmarck. His wife, Princess Sophia Dorothea, had come to detest her husband, who spent his time either engaged in endless European wars or enjoying his various mistresses. Königsmarck tried to help her escape from Hanover. He failed. The Count simply disappeared from the face of the earth. Actually, his body was shoved under the floorboards of the princess's dressing room. And the princess was banished and imprisoned. Her son, George Augustus, never forgave his father. In fact, father-son detestation would be the defining mark of the Hanoverian dynasty. They thrived on it. The English weren't too keen on that sort of behaviour either. They might have been more sympathetic if they'd approved of the two mistresses that George brought with him. But they called them the Maypole and the Elephant and decided they were simply greedy Germans with their snouts in the trough. And there were Scottish noblemen who thought that with George lacking support in England, this might be an opportunity to hand the throne back to the Stuart family, and in particular to James II's son, living in France and known as the Pretender. The French thought this would be a great idea. Louis XIV's mistress, Madame de Maintenon, even presented him with a song to be sung on his accession. It had originally been written for Louis to celebrate his recovery from a surgical procedure on his bottom. She translated it for the man who should, she thought, be James VIII of Scotland, and, why not, James III of England.
God save a gracious King, long live a noble King, God save the King.
The song turned out to be a bigger hit than the man. Jacobite Rising of 1715 was a complete flop, and after spending a couple of months wandering around the Highlands, James went home to France. George's throne was safe. He spent every winter in Hanover and left the government of England to his ministers. His own work was done by a new figure, the Prime Minister, a politician acting as a king's substitute. The first man to take on this role was Robert Walpole. Since Walpole didn't speak German, the pair of them communicated in schoolboy Latin. King George died a sudden death in 1727 while in Hanover, aged 67.